Why you go completely silent when someone hurts you. There is a moment after someone hurts you when you could say 100 things, but you say nothing. You look at your phone and don't know what to reply. Someone asks, "What's wrong?" You say nothing. Not because nothing happened, because too much happened. You replay the conversation. You analyze their words. You remember their tone. You think about what you should have said, what you wish you had said, and what you absolutely refuse to say while you're angry. And while the other person is waiting for an explanation, you're somewhere inside your own head trying to make sense of what just happened. From the outside, it can look like you're cold, detached, maybe even manipulative. But what if your silence isn't about pushing people away? What if, for some people, going quiet is the brain's way of creating distance between an emotional reaction and an irreversible decision? Because when you're deeply hurt, talking isn't always the first thing your mind wants to do. Sometimes your brain wants to stop. Stop the conversation. Stop the stimulation. Stop the pressure to explain something you haven't even figured out yourself. And that creates one of the strangest misunderstandings in human relationships. The person who is hurting the most can sometimes look like the person who cares the least. So today, we're going to unpack what may actually be happening when you go completely silent after someone hurts you. And more importantly, we're going to look at the difference between healthy silence, emotional shutdown, and using silence to punish someone. Because they can look almost identical from the outside. But psychologically, they're very different. Let's start with something most people misunderstand. Silence may begin before you consciously choose it. Imagine someone says something that hits a nerve. Maybe they criticize you in a way that feels unfair. Maybe someone you trusted betrays you. Maybe you're in an argument and suddenly realize the other person isn't trying to understand you anymore. You feel your body change. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts speed up. Your face gets still. You want to respond, but every possible response feels wrong. If you speak now, you're afraid you'll say something you don't mean. If you stay, you're afraid you'll make things worse. So you leave. You stop texting. You become unusually quiet. And later, someone asks, "Why did you shut down?" The strange part is that you may not even have a good answer. You just know that talking felt impossible. That's because intense emotion doesn't always make communication easier. Sometimes it makes communication harder. When your emotional arousal rises high enough, your attention narrows. Your thinking becomes more focused on the immediate emotional problem. And the ability to calmly organize everything you're feeling can become much more difficult. So when someone tells you, "Just explain what's wrong," they may be asking you to perform a task your mind isn't ready to perform yet. It's like asking someone to write a clean summary while the story is still happening. You don't have the conclusion. You have fragments. A sentence. A memory. A feeling. A tone of voice. A dozen questions. And one enormous thought. "I don't know what this means yet." So you become quiet. Not necessarily because you have nothing to say, because you have too much to sort through. But here's where your silence can become a pattern. For some people, this isn't something they started doing recently. It may be a strategy they learned much earlier in life. Think about what happened when you expressed difficult emotions growing up. Were you listened to? Or were you told you were too sensitive? Did people give you space? Or did they demand that you get over it? Did opening up make you feel closer to people? Or did it sometimes make you feel exposed? Because we learn from consequences. If expressing pain repeatedly leads to criticism, embarrassment, rejection, or conflict, a person can gradually learn something very simple. Maybe it's safer if I keep this inside until I understand it. And once that strategy works enough times, it can become automatic. You don't sit down at 25 years old and consciously decide, "From now on, whenever I'm hurt, I will become emotionally unavailable." You simply discover that silence works. Silence gives you time. Silence gives you control. Silence prevents you from saying something you'll regret. And sometimes, silence protects you from having your most vulnerable feelings exposed while they're still raw. That doesn't mean every quiet person has a difficult childhood. It doesn't mean silence automatically comes from trauma. People have different personalities, communication styles, and emotional habits. But if you've repeatedly learned that emotional exposure feels unsafe, your instinct to withdraw can become extremely strong. And that brings us to something important. You may not be avoiding the person. You may be regulating yourself. There's a major difference between, "I don't want to talk to you," and, "I can't talk to you properly right now." From the outside, they can look exactly the same. But internally, they're completely different. Imagine you're in an argument with someone you love. You know you're angry. You also know you're hurt. You know there are things you want to say. But you're aware that if you say them right now, you're probably going to say them with anger instead of clarity. So you stop. You walk away. You sit somewhere alone. You replay everything. And eventually, when your emotions settle, you can finally explain what happened. That's not necessarily avoidance. It can be a form of emotional regulation. The problem is that other people cannot see the process happening inside your head. They only see the silence. And humans are terrible at leaving empty spaces empty. When we don't know what someone is thinking, we create an explanation. So they may think, "They're punishing me. They don't care. They're trying to control me. They're being childish. They're done with me." Meanwhile, inside your head, the actual conversation might be, "I care too much to have this conversation while I'm this angry." That difference can destroy relationships if neither person understands it. But there is another possibility. Sometimes silence really is punishment. And this is where we need to be honest. Not every silent person is processing. Sometimes silence is used deliberately to create anxiety. You know you're upset. You know the other person is waiting. And instead of communicating, you intentionally withhold contact because you want them to suffer. You want them to chase you. You want them to feel guilty. You want them to wonder what they're going to lose. That's not the same thing. Healthy space sounds like, "I'm too overwhelmed to talk right now. I need some time, but I'll come back to this." Punishing silence sounds like, "I'm going to disappear and make you guess why." One creates space for regulation. The other creates uncertainty as a weapon. And knowing which one you're doing matters. Because if you genuinely need space, you don't have to become a perfect communicator. You just need to give the other person one piece of information. "I need time. I will talk when I'm ready." That one sentence can completely change what silence means. Here's something else people misunderstand about quiet people. Going quiet doesn't necessarily mean you're feeling less. Sometimes it means you're feeling more. Think about the person who gets angry and immediately starts talking. They say everything. Then 5 minutes later, "I didn't mean that." Then 10 minutes later, "Actually, I meant this." Then an hour later, "Okay, I was angry." For someone who processes internally, that sequence can feel terrifying. You don't want to release every thought while it's still changing. So you wait. You think. You replay the situation from different angles. You ask yourself, "Was I actually hurt? Was I angry? Did they mean what I think they meant? Did I misunderstand? Did I contribute to this? Is this a one-time mistake or part of a pattern? What do I actually want from this person?" Those questions can take time. And sometimes the person who looks the most emotionally distant is actually doing an enormous amount of emotional processing. That's why silence alone tells you almost nothing about what someone feels. A quiet person can be devastated. A quiet person can be furious. A quiet person can be terrified of losing you. A quiet person can care deeply. The absence of words is not the absence of emotion. Hashtag, but there's a hidden danger in becoming too good at silence. At first, silence protects you. Then it can become your default. And that's when the strategy starts working against you. You get hurt. You disappear. You process alone. You return when you're okay. But the other person never gets to understand what happened. So the same conflict happens again. You disappear again. They become frustrated. You feel misunderstood. You withdraw even more. And, eventually, you've created a relationship where nobody is technically fighting, but nobody feels close either. Because intimacy requires some degree of visibility. People can't understand a boundary they never hear. They can't repair something they don't know is broken. And they can't reassure you about something they don't know you're afraid of. So the goal isn't to become someone who talks immediately. The goal is to become someone who can communicate before silence becomes distance. There's a huge difference. Hashtag, here's the 3-stage system you can use. The next time someone hurts you, don't force yourself to have the entire conversation immediately. Instead, separate the process into 3 stages. Stage 1, pause. Don't answer while you're emotionally flooded. Take the space you actually need. Go for a walk. Sit somewhere quiet. Put the phone down. Let the first emotional wave pass. But don't disappear indefinitely. You're creating a pause, not ending communication. Stage 2. Name what happened. Once you're calmer, ask yourself one simple question. What exactly hurt me? Not. What's wrong with them? Not. Why do they always do this? Not. How can I make them understand? Just. What hurt me? Was it disrespect? Rejection? Feeling ignored? Feeling unimportant? Being misunderstood? A broken promise? Fear that you're going to lose someone? The more precisely you can name the wound, the easier it becomes to communicate the problem. Stage 3, return. This is the step quiet people often skip. Come back. You don't need a perfect speech. You can literally say, I needed some time because I was too emotional to talk clearly. What hurt me was this, ***. That's enough. You don't have to explain every thought you've had for the last 6 hours. You just need to let the other person see what happened inside you. Because that's what healthy communication actually is. Not saying everything. Saying what matters. Hashtag, and here's the uncomfortable truth. You go silent isn't sometimes because the reason you're emotionally strong. Sometimes you're afraid. Afraid that if you start talking, you'll cry. Afraid you'll sound needy. Afraid they'll dismiss you. Afraid they'll realize how much you care. Afraid that once you say the truth out loud, the relationship will change. And if that's you, your silence may be protecting you from something deeper than an argument. It may be protecting you from vulnerability, because vulnerability creates a risk. You can stay silent and keep control. Or you can speak honestly and give another person the opportunity to hurt you again. That's why opening up can feel so much harder than staying quiet. But there is something you should remember. Being vulnerable doesn't mean giving everyone access to you. You can be selective. You can have boundaries. You can take time. You can walk away from people who repeatedly hurt you. The goal isn't to become completely open with everyone. The goal is to stop confusing emotional protection with emotional isolation. Hashtag, the healthiest version of your silence. Imagine that someone hurts you. Instead of immediately attacking them, you pause. Instead of pretending you don't care, you acknowledge that you do. Instead of disappearing for 3 days, you say, I need some time to process this. I'll talk to you later. Then you actually come back. You explain what happened. You listen to their side. You decide what boundary you need. And then you move forward. That's not weakness. That's emotional control without emotional suppression. Because real emotional strength isn't never becoming overwhelmed. It's learning what to do when you are. And maybe that's the part you've been missing. You don't necessarily need to become louder. You don't need to become the person who immediately explains every feeling. You don't need to force yourself to communicate exactly like someone else. You just need to make your silence understandable. Because silence can be a healthy pause. It can be self-protection. It can be emotional processing. It can even be wisdom. But when silence becomes the only way you know how to deal with pain, it can slowly turn protection into isolation. So the next time you go quiet after someone hurts you, ask yourself one question. Am I taking space so I can return more clearly? Or am I disappearing because I'm afraid to be seen? Your answer will tell you a lot. Because there is nothing inherently wrong with needing time. There is nothing wrong with stepping away from an argument. There is nothing wrong with wanting to understand your feelings before you explain them. But the people who truly care about you shouldn't have to spend forever guessing what your silence means. Give them a door, even if it's a very small one. Say, I'm hurt. I need some time. But I'm not ignoring you. I'll come back to this. Sometimes that's all the communication your nervous system needs to learn that being honest doesn't have to mean losing control. And maybe, eventually, you'll notice something changing. You still go quiet when you're hurt. But now your silence isn't a wall. It's a pause. You still need time. But now you know how to ask for it. You still feel deeply. But you no longer believe that feeling deeply means you have to disappear. And that's the real goal. Not becoming someone who never shuts down. Becoming someone who knows how to find their way back. If you've ever gone completely silent after being hurt, tell me honestly. Do you go quiet because you need time to understand what you feel, or because talking about it feels too vulnerable? Your answer might help someone else realize they're not the only one. And if this video described something you've never been able to explain about yourself, subscribe. Because sometimes understanding your behavior is the first step toward changing it.